Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this midweek edition of The Wire, 21 Wire Live. Joining us now in a few minutes, we're going to be welcoming a special guest onto the stage to talk about a very important story. And we are streaming out live on X, YouTube, Rumble, BitChute, Facebook Live, and also streaming out on the audio streams and also at 21stcenturywire.com. If you miss any of this live stream, we'll be able to play it back later on any of these platforms. Well, of course, we encourage you to go to 21stcenturywire.com and watch it there on the show page afterwards. And thank you for joining us. And we had a riveting conversation a couple of weeks ago with Mats Nilsson, who is a fantastic historical researcher from Sweden, and Freddie Ponton. We were talking about things happening under the surface of the water in the Baltic Sea and also above the surface, and the geopolitical events that were surrounding that historic event. And we were drawing comparisons to the Nord Stream pipeline, the sabotage that took place in September of 2022. This is a major geopolitical event. Many of you follow our website will know that we've been covering this story for really since it happened, but especially for the last year and a half. And one of our great investigative journalists and contributors, Freddie Ponton, has recently published an article. In fact, this is an exclusive that has come out today. We'll put it up on screen. Nord Stream submarines in the NATO Lake. We're talking about the NATO Lake. We're talking about the Baltic Sea. We'll talk more about that in a moment. But this is the story. It's up at 21st Century Wire right now. Just recently been published. So this is hot off the press. And this is an amazing analytical and very well-researched investigative piece. And it really answers the question, or at least posits a very strong hypothesis for an open question regarding how the Nord Stream sabotage went down, why it went down in the place that it happened, why did they choose that specific location. We're going to answer a lot of these questions and a whole lot more. Let me bring on to the stage right now the author of this article is joining us on the live link right now, Freddie Ponton. Freddie, it's great to have you with us.
Well, it's a pleasure. Good to be here with you, Patrick. Thank you very much for having me on the show again.
Now, Fred, this is a fascinating story. This is obviously a huge story. We had Jeffrey Brodsky, a journalist, on the program a couple of weeks ago on the Sunday Wire to talk about an article that he had written exploring lots of different aspects of the Nord Stream sabotage event, plus all the international law and potential legal fallout from some of the machinations that are going on in the world of NATO and some of the different plots that have been floated out, no pun intended, including the Ukrainian diver plot, which was the sort of flavor du jour for a while, no longer in vogue, though. We'll talk about that among other things, Fred, but we'll bring this article back up on screen right now. And so the title is intriguing, Fred. And first of all, I'll hand it over to you. Why did you choose to publish this piece? And we'll get into the meat of the article and try to dissect and look at all the different points that you brought up. You're telling us a story here. And so a lot of people have done Nord Stream investigations. Freddie, there's a lot of material out there. And what you're positing here is, and I'll bring the bigger issue up on screen, submarine activity in the Baltic Sea. This is an area that has not previously been covered. Why should this be so compelling now? Do you have new information? Why submarines? Why now?
Thanks, Patrick. Well, first of all, this piece is interesting because it's part of a bigger investigation. So it is interesting for an investigators to look at the evidence or circumstantial evidence that surround the Nord Stream sabotage. So as you mentioned earlier, there's a lot of hypotheses, a lot of different stories that have emerged, you know, whether in Russia, whether in Ukraine and other countries. Everybody has come up with some kind of explanations, but I thought it was essential to address the obvious and the elephant in the room. And so, yes, this is a first part where I believe it's an important job but to describe the environment in which the sabotage took place. So we've looked at various informations prior, focusing on the underwater world, if you will, looking at air operation. We saw a lot of helicopter, P-8 Poseidons, a lot of things that, of course, of great interest in terms of trying to make sense of this sabotage and to identify the potential perpetrators. And then, of course, a lot of subsurface activities, maritime activities, operations. So it's a lot of data, a lot of information. And I've been looking into this for more than 18 months, speaking with many people from different countries, including the United States, but just trying to get a feel for it. And more importantly, this is such a specific domain. It's important to speak with experts as well, which can guide you or misguide you sometimes, but at least most of them guide you and tell you if you're on the right track, or if the assumptions or assertions that you're making are making sense. So I think it was great. And then, of course, I think I've just simply not been a great believer of the various mainstream theories about the Ukrainian drunken crews, coming into the NATO Lake like there was nobody else. And been able to conduct a sabotage, especially, as I say, after 18-month investigation, understanding the complexity and what it takes to put together an operation of this kind. So I think it was a quite successful exercise. I would say we found a lot of interesting things. So we're not here out there trying to say we've resolved the problem or we resolved the Nord Stream sabotage mystery, but I think it is just fair to address the elephant in the room, and more importantly, to characterize the environment in which the sabotage took place.
Yes, indeed. And Fred, what we'll do is, bring your research questions up on the screen here. And this is really important. And okay, we look at the article. We have pipelines on the Baltic Sea floor. This sabotage operation could have taken place anywhere along a huge stretch of pipelines on Nord Streams 1 and 2 lines. So 4 different pipelines and many different potential locations. And what you're asking, Fred, if I'm getting this right, we'll put up on screen. Why this location, Freddie? Why this? That's an important question that you have flagged here. And I think you go a very long way to explaining that in this article. The second question is, why was there 17 hours between explosions, the different explosions? My understanding is, that's a question that you are in the process of answering, which would come out in subsequent investigations. Is that right?
Yes, that is correct. Of course, it has been a very puzzling, to say the least, to trying to understand what could have motivated the perpetrators of this sabotage to put 17 hours between the explosions. Something that has, from day one, from the get-go, really puzzled the investigative team, and we're still working on it. But I think we're on the right track. I think the first question here in the article is, why would the saboteurs choose to blow up the Nord Stream pipelines in Denmark and Swedish exclusive economic zone instead of opting for a much shallower waters of Germany exclusive economic zone? So I think it's very important to understand the lay of the land, or the lay of the water, I should say, and understanding that the pipeline Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2, which starts from the Baltic shores of Germany in the village of Lubmin, and making their way towards the exclusive economic zone of Denmark. So these pipelines are pretty kind of together. There's 2 pipelines for Nord Stream 1 and 2 pipelines for Nord Stream 2. And then when they cross over to the Danish exclusive economic zone, this pipeline take a different route. Nord Stream 1 goes into Denmark territorial water, which has a complete different jurisdictions from the Danish exclusive economic zone. As for Nord Stream 2, Nord Stream 2 goes into the really right at the border of the exclusive economic zone and the territorial waters of Denmark. And then next time this pipeline will kind of come together and converge again is when they enter the Swedish exclusive economic zone. So that was interesting, because we needed to understand what could have motivated the saboteurs to choose this deep Bornholm basins, 80 meters, 100 meters of waters, and making it obviously more technically challenging for the saboteurs when they could have simply go to the German exclusive economic zone where you have 20, 30 meters of waters. And that will have allowed them to very quickly place some charges or place some explosive on the pipeline, and they could have addressed all the pipeline at once. So why it didn't happen that way? And I think that's an important question for investigators. We always ask why. Why did they do it? What was the motive, the means and the opportunity? But why it happened there in the Danish exclusive economic zone rather than in the German exclusive economic zone? So that was the first starting point of the investigations. And then very quickly we understood that the Nord Stream 2 project in Germany was simply not welcome, especially not by the Greens, especially not by the environmentalists, which were writing reports after reports, basically describing the areas where the pipeline was to be laid as areas which are known as Natura 2000 sites. Natura 2000 sites are simply environmental protected areas that are very dear to the environmentalists. And of course, these are areas that are protected. There's a complete European Union program on this Natura 2000 site. So if you take the perspective of someone coming from the elephant in the room, which would be a Western states involved with the sabotage, then suddenly everything starts to make sense. You have Germany, basically, Patrick, that is sanctioning the Nord Stream 2 pipelines 3 days prior Russia's military incursion into Ukraine. So surely, few months later, blowing up the pipeline in the German waters would have put a lot of hit on Germany. So from a geopolitical point of view, it's just simply not a good idea if the perpetrators is from a NATO member states. Now, secondly, as I just mentioned, the environmental aspect is absolutely important because, of course, this is an environmental sanctuary and no one wants to be destroying that, especially with the Greens with a very strong voice within the German government. So that would have been very prohibitive. And then the other part of it is what we discover in official document is that the areas where the Nord Stream 2 pipeline was going to go through is known as a is a busy traffic separation zone. It is basically a crossroad for maritime traffic between the Danish exclusive zone and the German exclusive economic zone. So very busy maritime activities. So if you get 20, 30 meters shallow waters, plus a lot of traffic, plus environmental issues, I think all these factors are extremely prohibitive. And that is the reason why I believe, to at least some of the reason why the saboteurs felt more comfortable to borrow the very, very deep waters of the Bornholm deep basins, because it affords obviously more discretions. It takes pretty much all the witnesses or potential witnesses away. And don't forget, Patrick, no one has any reason whatsoever to go down to check out on these pipelines, unless there would have been some kind of a maintenance schedule, which everybody would have known about, at least those that have a need to know. And I think it was quite clear at that time that this particular area was deemed the perfect area for the sabotage.
So just to reiterate, so the depth is key. There's plenty of more shallow areas where the pipelines, like even as shallow, Freddie, is 30 meters in some places. So that would have been ideal. I mean, it wouldn't have required a lot of sophisticated in terms of, underwater. The diving operation would be a lot less cumbersome, let's say, but it didn't have the depth. And the depth is what you're saying in this article, Freddie, is that depth provides the cover for a clandestine operation under the cover of, we'll get to it later, but Baltops 22, a major NATO exercise involving many different countries, many different ships bordering and going through different littoral waters and zones. And this was just the perfect location. So, I mean, this is what I think is phenomenal, Freddie, about this particular story and what you've uncovered here is you've really connected the dots and almost said this is the ideal location. This is the ideal location for a hit on the Nord Stream pipeline. So very well thought out. And it's a very high level of planning and analysis that's gone into this. And to think that, somehow this is going to be, carried out by a bunch of drunk Ukrainian super soldiers on a 52-foot sailboat, is what the Wall Street Journal and what Western intelligence and Germans were pushing for a while. I think some of the main German newspapers were pushing this. Deutsche Welt was also pushing this. We'll show the little clip from that in a moment, Freddie. But you kind of debunk that by what you're laying out in this article. And just before we go to that, Freddie, the title of your article is Submarines in a NATO Lake. And it says concept of a NATO lake, with Sweden and Finland joining NATO. All of the littoral nations there are pretty much have the Baltic Sea covered, except for a little bit of Russia, I think, and that's just about it. And so there's not much that can happen in this lake that NATO won't see and know about unless, Freddie, NATO is the one who's doing the activity. So, I mean, that's the whole, some people joke about the NATO lake, but it kind of is a NATO lake at this point, Fred. And I think that's just the overarching kind of obvious point that comes through in your story, Fred, is that, how on earth could anything have happened there without NATO, A, knowing about it, and B, if not, then certainly they would be the ideal party to carry out the sabotage. Go ahead, Fred.
Absolutely, they would have known. I think what's important for an investigator is to have access to the crime scene and to be able to characterize and to froze the crime scene as the saboteurs left them. So you have a complete image, a very good image of how the crime scene was left, and that is a very important thing. So unfortunately, as most of people know now, that it took about 53 days or 50 for 50 days to allow Nord Stream 2, for Denmark to allow Nord Stream 2 AG, the German company responsible for operating the pipelines and laying down the pipelines at the bottom of the Danish EEZ. And it's unbelievable that it took 53 days before anyone from Nord Stream 2 was able to go at the bottom and actually check for themselves. So it's a lot of time that spent there. And during that period of time, obviously, a lot of things has changed. So in my view, from an investigative point of view, this crime scene is perverted because only a few parties had the privilege to access it, to froze it, to record it, and even to take a sample from it, even maybe piece of pipes and other elements that was removed from the crime scene from what we could gathered. And that is no longer a crime scene that you can work with as an investigator. So you got to have a different approach. And that falls into really this article about asking the right question. And the first questions we were trying to answer is to characterize, how do we characterize the crime scene? What are these water about? We are told they are exclusive economic zone. What does that mean? Who's entitled? What is the legal framework that governs these particular waters, whether it's Denmark or Sweden? Are we talking about fishing areas, exploiting natural resources at the seabed? Are we talking about basically a laying down cable and fiber optic cable on the seabed, a complete cable network systems? Is that what's important? Is there more going on in these waters? And then very quickly, what we've realized that these waters have a significant role and play a significant role in military planning for NATO. And that's when everything started, because of course you would expect the mainstream media to present and characterize the Danish and Swedish exclusive economic zone and inform the public that these areas are actually NATO submarine training areas. And so that is really the beginning.
This is a key point, Freddie. And so when did the penny drop? Because an application was made to the Danish Environmental and Energy Agency for work on Nord Stream 2 by Nord Stream AG, if I'm not mistaken, or the responsible parties. And then that was filed publicly. And we'll bring this document up on stage, Freddie. I think this is where the clues started arising here. And you found out that, well, here's the document, which has been translated. We've got that up in your article. It's in PDF format, Freddie. And so tell us about this document and what does it contain that had led you down this path?
Yes, sure. What was important, I think, and a place that we wanted to understand better was exactly the areas where the pipelines were laid. So obviously, the first choice will be to get access to these permit, because permits kind of provide the set of conditions, terms and conditions that explain exactly what are the responsibility of the parties. So in this particular circumstances, you have the Danish Energy Agency, the DEA, speaking on behalf of many different cross-section of the Danish administrations, which granted a permit to Nord Stream 2 AG in October 2019. So we reviewed this document because it's very interesting. And as we go along in this document, we clearly see that we're learning some information about the Danish exclusive economic zone, and we understand the obligation of Nord Stream 2. Amongst the obligations that are basically featured in this permit in section 28, we can clearly see that the Danish agency remind Nord Stream 2 that the Danish EEZ, where the pipeline are going to be laid, are NATO submarine exercise area. And any data, anything that will be observed during the constructions and operational phase will be considered by the Danish governments. And the idea for them is to make sure that Nord Stream 2 AG is not going to publish any kind of information to third party with regards to submarine activities or military practices area and activities where they lay in the pipe in the Danish EEZ. So very important, because first it confirms that it is indeed a NATO submarine exercise area, and the very place where the Nord Stream pipeline was sabotaged, we just find out that it's a NATO submarine exercise or operation area, because the term exercises apply as, for various, exercise, maritime, large-scale exercise, but it's exactly applied the same for operation. It is a military practice area or a military operational area. So that was the first find that is really kind of open up for us a certain level of interest, if you will, in better understanding these military practice areas. And very quickly, when you go further down into the documents, it's really, really interesting, because we find out that a consultation response from the Bundeswehr for Infrastructures and Hydrography, the BSH, was asked basically on behalf of NATO to provide some kind of recommendations as far as, what should be considered for Nord Stream 2 AG to conduct this particular laying of pipe in the Danish EEZ in the best condition possible. And what they're saying is that basically the German Navy and the German authority should be involved in this particular assessment, because they administers 9 contiguous NATO submarine diving area east of Bornholm Island. All right, so that's straight in the middle of the Bornholm deep basins. And now we're learning with this document that Germany is responsible to administer these NATO submarine diving areas. So you would thought that maybe this is in the Danish EEZ. Perhaps Denmark will actually have authority over underwater movement and submarine activities in the EEZ, but it's not. It's actually Germany that is responsible for that. And then further down, we even understand that actually Germany is responsible to administer not only the German EEZ and the Danish EEZ, but also the Swedish EEZ and the Polish EEZ. And from an investigative point of view, knowing that the German EEZ and the Polish exclusive economic zone are adjacent to the Danish and the Swedish exclusive economic zone, which provide a complete loop corridor, if you will, for underwater movement across this exclusive economic zone. So that is a perfect, if you will, situation in terms of if someone wants to operate and control the water movement in this particular exclusive zone, they have basically one single body that is capable of deconflicting. What the term deconflicting means, that avoiding interference or collisions in this particular water space. So it's very interesting, because that starting to now tell us we can characterize the water in which the Nord Stream pipeline sabotage took place. These are NATO submarine ground, and they are now administered and governed by a German authority with link with the German Navy.
And I'll bring this this map up on screen, Freddie, here, and this will tell us where this comes from. This particular graph, and it does show the the submarine training areas or submarine exercise areas. I believe in the purple hash areas. So you've identified there are specific submarine training areas there. So why does this make such an important point, Freddie? Is because, well, during June of 2022, this was happening. Explain what was going on here. This is Baltops 22, major NATO exercise involving almost every NATO member state. And this is happening while the Ukraine war is going on. We'll talk about the implications of this, but so this is all happening in this area. But there's very little, if any, talk about submarines, Freddie. So tell us why that is, and then what's the significance of this?
Well, as you go along with the investigation, you want to obviously put your theory to the test. And for us, what was very important is to say, okay, now we've established beyond the shadow of a doubt, without making an assumption, that the areas of the Danish EEZ and Swedish EEZ are military areas, which are described by governments and government documents as area under the control of a German authority. So the next move for us is to look at a period of time that led to September 26, 2022, when the Nord Stream pipeline explosion were recorded, and trying to understand between the period of May 2022 and September 22, what was the water activities, what was NATO during this period of time, so that we've identified a certain number of naval exercises, some of them known as LSE, large-scale exercise maritime, directly delivered by Strike for NATO. And that is basically on behalf of the Supreme Allied Commander Europe at SHAPE. So Strike for NATO is responsible for the planning of maritime operation across their responsibility and NATO responsibility, area of responsibility, if you will. And in the planning of exercise and naval exercises, there's a chain of command that is in place there, which conceptualize this exercise and decide where these particular exercises are going to take place. So that involves different kind of bodies, that it involves different kind of outfits. It involves, of course, local partner, which is the coastal Baltic states, if you will, including Denmark and Sweden, but also Poland and Germany, as well as Lithuania, Latvia, a little bit further east. But what's really interesting is that when we started to trying to make and have a better understanding on the structures of this exercise, especially Baltops 2022, it was the largest naval exercise in the Baltic Sea that preceded the sabotage. So there is something to look at, but we need to understand what is it that we are looking at. And our first mission was to find an official document that could literally outline the structures, the command and control structures, as well as the chain of commands behind this exercise. And it took us a while to get it, but we eventually did it. And
you had a stroke of luck, didn't you? You were watching Danish. Was it Danish television? Tell us the story. I'll bring up the image on screen. And you managed to find this organizational chart, not just for NATO, Freddie, but for Baltops 22. How did this come about?
Yeah, well, it's absolutely, it was a strike of luck. And I was looking for information from Denmark, and specifically from Bornholm, because of the proximity, because of a lot of these naval operations were reported to take off from the Bornholm Islands, from Roni and other areas in Bornholm. So I'm just trying to look around for information, and then I bump into this Danish TV2 program. TV2 is a Danish broadcaster based in Bornholm, and they had a program on June the 14th where they basically were invited. I guess they were invited on board of the a diving ship known as the Sullivan Y311. Sullivan means sea lion. And it's really interesting because they were obviously reporting on the Danish Navy and their diving services and their activities during Baltops 2022. So they come on board of the boat and they start to film, of course, the areas where they're in, and they're filming the environments. And then very quickly, very briefly, I would say, they film a TV set, a large flat screen where there is a map. We can see a map on that flat screen. And I literally posed. Took me a couple of times to get it right, but I eventually posed on that particular frame and discovered that this was actually Baltops 2022 organization chart, which was provided to the participants of the exercise by Strike for NATO. So I've literally kind of cleaned up the pictures and created a blow up version of it to really have a good look at this organization chart. And it was providing invaluable knowledge as far as the, as I say, command and control and chain of command of this large-scale exercise. It's the U.S.-led naval exercise, so the U.S. Navy is in charge. The commander of Strike for NATO, responsible for delivering this exercise, is a U.S. Vice Admiral. His name is Eugene Black at the time that he was responsible, and his deputy commander was from the British Royal Navy, and he was Rear Admiral James Morley. So it's very interesting. And then, of course, we decrypted a little bit more this organization chart to understand who's there. So as you can imagine, there's a lot of participants, and it's a color-coded charts, which, obviously give you an understanding about blue for blue waters, green for different areas, like a littoral coast and island, amphibious operation. And then the purple water has been a bit of a mystery. At the beginning, we thought it was the red team, which are used for exercise to kind of counteract and trying to get the exercise a little bit off its mark and off balance, if you will, and test really the validity of the exercise. But we came to the conclusion that this was a joint combined operation. So it indicates joint combined operation, open sea and littoral space under NATO Maritime Command from MARCOM. Okay, so MARCOM is the NATO Allied Maritime Command based in Northwood, UK, in Great Britain. So that was very interesting for us. We know that the divers obviously received this particular documents. We see it's only page 1, which implies there's more page to that. But really the takeaway for us, because we were already looking into these submarine activities and NATO submarine exercise and operational areas in the Danish Easy, then suddenly what we see is that there is a submarine operation authority that is featured directly onto the organization chart, and we are informed by a little flag that this is the German Submarine Operation Authority that we were looking for, and it has
and you've highlighted that in red.
Yes.
There, so we got that up on screen, Fred. So that's the Submarine Authority, headed by German, or the German military responsible for that component of Baltops 22, the submarine activity. Is that correct?
That is correct. Absolutely correct. So submarine operation authority were active. And if they are active, then it means that you have submarine and underwater movements during the exercise, something that was never reported by the German. The German felt that it was, nobody's business to understand that a submarine operation and exercise were conducted during Baltops 2022, and that these guys are literally responsible to deconflict at least 4 exclusive economic zone, including Denmark, Sweden, Poland, and Germany. And then, of course, with very quickly, you can find that in 2016, the Submarine Operational Authority had invited Poland to join. So commanders from submarine or submariners from the Polish Navy were invited to join the Submarine Operation Authority, which fell under the Maritime Operations Center of the German Navy. And these guys basically were given the opportunity to learn to conduct joint operation with the German, and also access the band VLF, very low frequency kind of a communication tool, so that they can start to learn and patch themselves in and coordinate their underwater operation. So Submarine Operation Authority is actually a joint operation and joint authority which the Polish are involved with the German Navy. It's a very interesting story, and I put a link, I think, on the article so people can review that. And then, of course, the rest, Patrick, I'm not going to go into details now because it will take us forever, and some of it will be addressed in the second segment of these investigations. But it's clear to us that we can clearly see there is another kind of, not deconfliction agencies, but a platform directed by Northwood UK in England that is responsible for basically interfacing with the shipping industry. And you can see it on the map here. It's basically 2 boxes below Suburb Hove. It's called NCAGS, NCG Northwood. It's just an interface. It's responsible to speak with the shipping lane for the shipping industries and making sure that if there is restricted areas, exclusion zone where submarine activities or surface activities are taking place, then they obviously need to inform the shipping lanes and the shipping industry. So that's very interesting because obviously we can clearly see that they're going to a great length to structure the exercise, controlling the exercise, but also the operational theater. And that's very important because this is a kind of a systematic pattern of behaviors that we've encountered during our investigation. Everything is about to protect the operational area, shielding the operation, and they are used different tools to do that. And the Submarine Operation Authority is one of them.
So let's just establish something. I mean, you mentioned Seymour Hersh, the American investigative journalist, the award-winning, Pulitzer Prize-winning American investigative journalist who originally put out this initial report in February of 2023, positing that the United States CIA joint-led with the Pentagon under the executive branch is responsible for the Nord Stream sabotage. And I'll bring this up on screen. This is a slide from one of your earlier articles. You did a couple of extensive research-based posts at 21st Century Wire over a year ago, where you laid out all sorts of possibilities. But these were the questions then, Freddie, and so these were the questions we're looking to answer. And what Hersh got right, what Hersh got wrong, we don't know for sure. At the time, Panama City Navy diving team, I think we can check that box. They were involved. They were at Baltops 22. The drill is a cover story. Baltops as a drill. It's highly likely, according to all the circumstantial evidence that's been assembled here. And so we've got that as well. P8 sonar buoy detonation. This was part of Hersh's original story. The jury's still out on this, of course. There's many different possibilities. Initially, we thought that might be the case. A lot more questions have arisen, however, which some of those you've addressed a little bit in some other reports, and still more work to do, obviously. Norway's involvement in the sabotage mission, I think high probability there, along with a number of other NATO member states during Baltops. U.S. and Norway corner the gas market in Northern Europe. Yeah, that's kind of obvious. That actually happened. So there's your kind of means, motive, and opportunity. Not everything is super clear. What I think, and you can comment on this because a lot of people will be asking this question, Freddie. I tend to think Hersh has the general theme, the general narrative right. There are some details, however, that might be off in Seymour Hersh's story, but I don't think that's worth stumbling over because I think the gist of it is that something happened during Baltops 22, Freddie, but not just Baltops, Freddie. There are other drills that happened before and after Baltops 22 that are equally crucial to this story. If you just explain that, I know you've mentioned it in your article here, but if you can kind of just enlighten us on that front a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Cy Hersh story is a very interesting one. Of course, everybody can look into it and take away whatever they like, or they can challenge it because it is challengeable. There's a lot of inconsistency, but what's really important, I think, is giving a tone, and he's giving a tone because simply my view on that, and of course other people might have different opinion about this. But my view on this is before an operation of such magnitude with such a risk, so sensitive politically, you would expect to have a different concept of operation for this particular operation. So if indeed Hirsch is right and the saboteurs choose the cover of Baltops or Baltic Operation 2022 to infiltrate a few divers at the bottom of the seabed to plant explosives, why not? But I think you really have to look at the possibility that there were, as it's usually the practice, different concept of operation. You know, they don't present to the executive only one concept of operation. They're gonna basically look at maybe 2-3 options, and then they're gonna rehearse. They're gonna try these options to see if they're feasible, if they work, if the skill, the expertise, and everything is feasible, and then they'll pick up from that maybe 1 or 2, and they'll present it to the executive, which is going to make the final decision on that. But really, I think what's important here is not to just close your eyes and believe, you know, just blindly what Hirsch is saying. All you need to do is to do your homework and trying to understand it, and to understand the activities of NATO during these exercises. And in certain areas, obviously, you might bump into what Hirsch claimed. For example, when he mentions about Panama City, and when he mentions about divers using minesweepers and, you know, as a platform to dive from, all that is possible. We're not saying it's not possible. What I'm saying is that there is definitely a quite substantial representations from Panama City Naval Surface Water Center. And that is really interesting because some of the key elements and the key commanders responsible for mine countermeasures exercise and explosive ordnance exercises, which is good because we're looking for explosives, are coming or originated from Panama City. For example, you have the U.S. 6th Fleet Task Group Commander Mine Countermeasure Detachment, which you can see on the organization chart. He's working with EOD platoon, UUV platoon, and he's obviously a U.S. Navy commander. His name is Captain Sam Brasfield, and he's actually based at the U.S. Naval base in Rota, Spain. And Brasfield is the former commander of the Naval Diving Salvage Training Center in Panama City. Right now, that could have been a coincidence, but of course, it's important also to understand that his colleagues, that is also based in Rota, Spain, the commander of Expeditionary Logistics CTF-68 is a U.S. Navy commander. His name is Captain Cameron Chen. He's a Commodore, and Commodore Cameron Chen was responsible for the entire expeditionary logistics from the CTF-68 that is based also in Rota, Spain. So what's interesting about him is also the former Naval Diving Salvage Training Center in Panama City commander. So now we get two former commanders from Panama City, which works under the Explosive Ordnance Disposal and Diving Center, the CINO-DIVE, at the Naval Support Activity Panama City, NSSCD. So that's all that is obviously in support of what Hirsch was saying. And then we also found a lot of MCM subject matters. Subject matters are people that are coming from a division of the Naval Surface Warfare Centers in Panama City, and they're going to provide a complete support, if you will, to design, conceptualize all the diving operation, which involve explosive, mine countermeasures, the use of unmanned underwater vehicle, RV, all MCM, but on an expeditionary level. And these particular divers, normally when you put them together with various kind of set of skills, they become and they form an expeditionary mine countermeasures unit. So they can go from 27 people to 10 people, depending on the job, and they work very closely from amphibious ready group, which, as we know, is very, of course, relevant and interesting because we know that the Kearsarge ARG, the Kearsarge ready group, amphibious ready group, was deployed by Jean Black and others in the Baltic Sea during Baltops 22, but also during other exercises further down the line, leading up to September 26. And what's interesting is this XMCM, this Expeditionary Mine Countermeasures Divers and Experts, tends to work alongside this amphibious ready group. and we understand that many concepts of operations and sea base and so on has been developed by these guys. So having them in the waters, having them operating, in close proximities of the Nord Stream blast sites, and knowing that this is a NATO submarine training grounds, then you just have to put the dot together, I suppose.
So another important person here, I mean, Seymour Hersh was talking that this was done via the executive branch. So Joe Biden would have been president at the time. So the chief of naval operations, the CNO for Joe Biden at the time, was Admiral Mike Gilday. And you can place him on location at Baltops and before, and he would be one of the key people if this was a U.S.-led covert operation, involving multiple facets of the military and the Pentagon. He would be one of the main guys, wouldn't he?
Yeah, he's a very interesting character. I mean, Michael Gilday is very respected, across the Navy. He's someone that has had an extensive career, and someone that loves to be on operation theater. I think any commander, any CNO loves and miss sometimes even to be on operation theater. But we must say that in summer 2022, Gilday made a lot of move across Europe, and we saw him in Reykjavik, for example, in Iceland in February, at the early part of the year. Basically landing in Iceland at the same time a major submarine exercise was taking place. I think the name of the exercise was Mangus, Dynamic Mangus 2022. And interestingly, this exercise is led by what is known as a ComSub NATO, which is a commander submarine NATO. It's based in Northwood, UK. And he takes the leadership for this particular exercise, which takes place between Iceland and Norway. And you have multiple submarine coming to Iceland. You have Norwegian submarine, you got German submarine, you got, of course, US submarine. And we know, of course, not of course, but we've spoken to people that have some good understanding of who participated, and there's stronger reason to believe that the UK as well sent a submarine to this exercise. So the coincidence of having all these submarine activities and Gilday spending time in Reykjavik, in Iceland, visiting the P8 Poseidon, speaking with the squadrons responsible for anti-submarine warfare, all that is obviously just some kind of cherry on the cake, and it helps you to a bit understand, if there is a possibility that the chain of command was in place and wanted to keep an eye on the concept of operation using submarine, because the executive at the time wanted an answers, and that's of course lead us to this famous or infamous press conference at the White House with Olaf Scholz and Biden discussing, and Biden confirming that if they need to take them out or take out the pipeline, that they'll be able to do it. Well, you can only say that if you've tested your concept of operation. So the question, of course, is where Dynamic Mangus 22 and Gilday presence there perhaps suggest that this was perhaps the areas where they rehearsed this concept of operation. That's a question. So I cannot prove it, of course.
Yes. And what's something else is interesting. Joe Biden, before he left office, he gave preemptive pardons to a number of people. A preemptive pardon is that they're innocent of any future crime or trial. I mean, it's kind of really bizarre, but Biden did this, including with his son Hunter. And one of the people that he gave a preemptive pardon to was General Mark Milley, who is head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Now, assuming everything that we're looking at here fits together, can we place Mark Milley at the scene of Baltops 22?
Yes, absolutely. He was there on June the 4th, actually. He's reported on board of the Kearsarge, this amphibious ready group, LHD-3. So he's definitely there just before the kickstart of Baltops 2022. He's meeting with Swedish Prime Minister Magdalena Andersson, and is also meeting with the Swedish I think with Peter Ulviks as well. So there's a lot of kind of different official from Sweden that's going to be mingling, if you will, with the U.S. military, including with General Francis Donovan as well. So all these names will come out in the second part of our investigation. But it is very true, and it's interesting. You noted that he was pardoned. So what was he pardoned? Is there any other ulterior motive or alternative motive for him to have been pardoned? We don't know. All we know is that there's a very strong presence of the top brass. And Milley is interesting as well, because this is someone that will be involved with the National Security Council. So if you go back to the story of Cy Hirsch, where the National Security Council members, some of the members of the NSC were meeting in a kind of having a fringe meeting next to the White House building. And you will expect to have people like Milley to be part of it, and bring along someone like Sieno Gilday, because he is the naval aide for Biden. He is naval aide. He's an appointee of Joe Biden. So if Biden have any question, or NSC has any questions about naval operation in the European and theater under NATO, they'll go to Milley, and they'll of course go to Sieno Gilday. So these are potential person of interest in the investigation for sure.
Yeah, it's very interesting, because as head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, if anyone was to take the hit politically, he would be one of the top people that would take the hit. Obviously, the president has immunity, executive privilege, as we call it in America, but not everybody else does. And certainly there could be a heavy political price to pay should somebody want to grind the axe on this after the fact. And looking at the Trump administration now, they're definitely going after scalps for all the things that have happened over the previous years. So Mark Milley, interesting character, and to put him on site during all of this, in the middle of all this, and certainly would be part of an operation if we believe what Seymour Hersh said is true, and if all the pieces fit together in what you're showing here, Freddie, which is quite a compelling circumstantial case. Definitely a person of interest, 100%. So as are some of the other people that you mentioned, and there are some interesting subject area experts here that if this was out of Panama City, if you needed the top specialist team, you had all of the right people on site, Freddie, is what you're saying. Everybody was there.
Yes, and what's interesting, perhaps, and from my point of view and from an investigative point of view, what's interesting is they are running the tactical diving center. Okay, so it's called a tactical operations center, or tactical diving center. So a DTOC is very important in this kind of operation, because you have someone with the technology that is able to monitor all the underwater activities and all the diving activities from the land, based in Halvunda in Sweden. And then you have, of course, a line of communication with what is known as a MOC, Maritime Operations Center, which for the Baltops 22, for example, would have been USS Mount Whitney, right, which is equipped with tremendous amounts of technology, especially ISR. I think it's got C4, C5 ISR technology, which is really about gathering intelligence and then conducting surveillance and reconnaissance on your enemies and on the operational area. So having these guys from, as you said, Panama City, being brought in by Sam Brassfield to the exercise, to design the exercise, and this exercise are added, of course, to Baltops 2022. The amphibious group is added to Baltops 2022. All that is integrated and controlled by basically U.S. Navy personnel and officers. And the rest of the control is with Supreme Allied Commander Europe, which at the time was Todd Volter, General Todd Volter. So again, you have on top of the food chain, you have a very important person here, and he will be replaced by another U.S. general, General Cavalli, which is, I believe, still the Supreme Allied Commander Europe to this day. So very interesting, because you can see that a lot of the command and control, a lot of decisions, especially the Supreme Allied Commander Europe, whose job is to convert basically the political message into a military operation. So if there is an order coming from Biden and saying, I want an options to take out the Nord Stream pipeline, well, someone needs to convert this political will into a military operation. And for that, you need to understand the chain of command, which is going to be the second part of this investigation.
Right. So, I mean, this is a very interesting section of mop-up operations, Freddie. Mop-up operations. So we have, Germany. But by the way, Germany has some of the top stealth subs in the world. They're one of the leaders in this technology, and this is Freddie. Germany knows every inch of this Baltic Sea. If in terms of submarine operations, nobody else really is on that level in this area, other than the Russians maybe, but really around Denmark and Germany and in these EEZ overlaps, it is Germany, isn't it? They'd be one of the top sort of capable submarine operations there. You've got the photo here of, I think, one of their U-212 class, I believe, tremendous submarine tech by Germany. And then the mop-up operation, Freddie. This is kind of an important part of the story that nobody talks about. Explain to us how you think this went down. Give us the time frame. Who might have been involved? Go ahead.
Yeah, it is interesting because, of course, when we reviewed the organization chart of BALTOPS 2022, we started to basically break down every single participants and understanding their skills, their areas of expertise. And very quickly, we found out that some of these participants, especially the expeditionary exploitation units and explosive ordnance guys, were actually earlier that year training in Key West, Florida. And my understanding from the report that I've shared, I think in the article, is that these guys were working on underwater post-blast forensic operation. So it's a very particular skills. You just don't become an expert in post-blast forensic for underwater, events unless you've been trained. And this particular Key West Naval Air Stations is really specialized to train special operators, CIA, various, what I call the interagencies. So anyone that wants to have an understanding about these kind of skills, post-blast investigation, they'll go down there and they'll be trained. What was interesting is that we found at least two major participants of BALTOP 2022, including Expeditionary Exploration Unit 1 and the Explosive Ordnance Mobile Unit 3, which are part of the organization chart. And they were there training on this post-blast. So they're training to go under the water, to examine the sites, take sample, maybe reverse engineer whatever they're going to find there, but also to be able to mop up the blast site if necessary. And what was very interesting to me is that along came the Naval Diving Salvage Training Center, the Surface Fleet DTXG squadrons, the Defense Threat and Exploitation Group of Great Britain. So the British Royal Navy sent their top divers, or salvage divers, EOD divers. They work on special activities, and these guys are with the Americans, and they are working basically in Key West, learning the skills of post-blast underwater investigation, which is a very, very particular skill. So, as I say, seeing them there, it's really interesting because we know for a fact that after the explosion were recorded, within a month or two, there was a launch for a mop-up operations, or at least an investigations, let's put it that way, an investigation into the explosion, trying to understand who could be the perpetrators. And we know that Denmark was involved. We know that Sweden was involved, trying to obviously investigate the crime scene and the blast sites. And we know the American Biden, it's not a secret, Biden announced it on national television that he's going to send divers to see if he could help and find out, what really happened and who will be the perpetrators, which I found it quite funny. But on the other hand, what really was important is to understand that this crime scene was perverted, is know that Russian were not allowed, German were not allowed, and you had US Navy ships like USS Hamilton basically guarding the space, you know, telling Greenpeace from Germany and other people willing to, you know, to take the risk to dive there to see what happened, to tell them to go away. So it was a well-guarded secret, and they did not allow anyone to come onto the blast site before everything was cleaned up. And result, we got nothing out of the Swedish investigation. They say that, oh, you know, the jurisdiction is too vague and they don't have enough jurisdiction to carry on or to justify more investigating. Danish pulled out literally a few weeks later. And then the German are yet to produce their investigative report, which I don't think we're going to see after what I've just released today. So again, it's very convoluted, you know, and no one has come up with a clear pictures. And the reason for that is because this kind of operation, Patrick, especially submarine seabed irregular warfare operation, they do not happen in a vacuum. This operation happens and they communicate with surface vessels, and they communicate as well with air support. It's part of a anti-submarine warfare and seabed warfare. Nothing is in a vacuum, and it can only be successful if these three-dimensional operations are conducted, you know, and coordinated, if you will. And that's exactly what the Submarine Operation Authority do. They conflict the operational areas, and the surface water troops are operators are there to support the operation with an amphibious group. And then the skies in the air, the eyes in the sky, sorry, are there to make sure that there is no interference as well. So I think that we are getting somewhere. It's really about putting this puzzle together.
So the other question is, and I just want to add as well, and it's important for people to understand this, Freddie, all of your research is open source. So you have managed to cobble together, I don't know how you've done it, Freddie, but you've done it. Yeah. A lot of work, and also a lot of reading other people's research and checking facts with other researchers, talking to experts in the field. It's a very tedious process to know that what you're looking at is actually what you think it is. And then somehow plugging that into the Nord Stream story to see if it fits. So you have done it. A lot of people have taken this story, Freddie, and their investigations in different directions. They focused on different things. Explain that, because I think that's important. And we find this with other unsolved mysteries and crime scenes that are very controversial, like 9/11, for instance, or MH17, MH370, and the list goes on. But this, you've taken a different approach. It's like you have kind of done a reverse kind of analysis. Instead of looking for the sort of obvious things on the surface, tracking boats with AIS data and so forth, you're building more of a circumstantial case, which is starting to come together, quite frankly. You've got the framework of a plausible operation done by NATO, which to my knowledge, Freddie, nobody has put this together yet to make a really, really strong circumstantial, plausible case that only NATO could have done it. Because I'm sorry, and we'll throw this up on stage. I'd love to show this clip of the of the Ukrainians. I mean, actually, let's just show the Ukrainians. I want to get your thoughts after that. I'm going to bring up on screen the infamous, if you will, you know, the infamous Ukrainian super soldier story here. We'll bring the video up from DW, and we'll share that with everybody, because I think people have to see this. Basically, this is from Deutsche Welt, which they broadcast a documentary, Who Blew Up the Nord Stream Pipelines? And it's like this unsolved mystery, and they sent their best investigators. I'm going to play just a few seconds of this because it is absolutely one of the great classics, Freddie, here. We'll bring this up on screen if everyone can see that. Fantastic. Okay, I'm going to play this now. So yeah, just enjoy this little clip here.
The attack on the Nord Stream pipelines. Was it an attack on Germany?
It's an attack of historic dimensions.
Did this inconspicuous sailing yacht really have something to do with it? Did deep-sea divers blow up the pipelines? To find out, we even plumbed the depths of the Baltic Sea.
We're most certainly being watched.
The clues lead us to Ukraine, where we track down suspects.
Are you kidding me?
It's the kind of attack that could have triggered a wide range of war.
And it's one of the biggest mysteries of our time. Around the world, people are asking, who could have done this?
Who could have done it, Freddie? Who could have done it? So, I mean, a lot of effort has been put into crafting, you know, some kind of a narrative around some of these completely implausible, dare I say, official conspiracy theories. Clearly, this one looks like a red herring after looking at your investigation. Freddie, go ahead.
Yes, I think, you know, it's investigators that take the Nord Stream story seriously to the heart is just going to stick to what is really provable, something that has meat around the bone, something that's going to hold water. That's really, if you want to be taken seriously, you need to come up with a fact, and nobody can, you know, challenge the fact. You just bring document from governments, you present what you see, you describe what you see, and then you pile up this information to a degree that you can come with a theory that actually holds waters and makes sense. Now, saying that the areas where the Nord Stream pipelines were destroyed, it's really important to establish that this is a NATO submarine ground. So that's when NATO submarines are operating in these waters. That I can prove. Can I prove that these Ukrainians were on board of this little sailboat, you know, and going around to all these spots, you know, in the middle of the NATO Lake, as you said, and then being able? You see in the video, they say, "Oh yeah, I think we've been watched." Of course, you've been watched. You don't get into the NATO Lake unless they know who you are. So you see that they're telling you. And then I think further down in this movie, which this documentary, which I watched, I think once, is there is the divers which are sent there. First of all, they're not sent there on the Andromeda. They send with a proper diving support ships, you know, that has compression chambers, recompression chambers, that has obviously the boats, they have the cranes, they're equipped like any serious operators will do. And then the first attempt going down to the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, they can't even find it. And these guys are not super equipped, you know, they have no equipment or anything. They just go there, just trying to find a pipeline. And on the first dive, they couldn't do it. The problem is when you do a dive like this, you can't find it at 80 meters. Next day, you can't dive. You have to wait 24 hours before diving again, you know, because of the pressure, even if you go into the compression chambers. So it was definitely a deco dive. So they came back, they did this, probably stayed a few hours in the waters, you know, to be able to come back to the surface safely. So that's really interesting. But someone that is doing a sabotage is, you know, the clock is ticking. And importantly, if you're doing it in front of NATO maritime assets and in the waters that are monitored, every single movement and underwater movement in these waters are watched by the German authority. So when the German authorities are telling us the Ukrainian did it, I say, well, they went on the waters in front of you and you didn't know about it, but you couldn't tell the entire world that your organization, your submarine operation authority responsible to deconflict this entire area, was not aware that some guys were goofing around with explosive in an area where multi-billion-dollar submarines are going around. Are you kidding me? No. You cannot just swallow that story. That's why I don't even, some people ask me sometimes, they say, why do you think, you know, Ukrainian? I'm like, I don't need to investigate further the Ukrainian flag because it simply doesn't hold water, Patrick. It doesn't. Not when you know what I know.
Yeah, I mean, and I think just common sense, Occam's razor, just tells you, just looking at the pipelines, there's a layer of cement around them, plus the steel. You need all sorts of cutting technology. You need state-of-the-art everything. and you need a backup team in case there's redundancies, because you only get one shot at this. So if you consider the implications of a terrorist attack on a major infrastructure, piece of infrastructure that's supplying energy to the whole of Europe, you get one shot at it. So, I mean, you can't, nothing is basically going to be left to chance. So you need the best experts, the most highly trained, highly skilled specialists, divers who've been diving for 20 years in some cases. You need all of the 3D imaging. You need all of the comms, the decompression, the recompression, the oxygen, everything, redundancies upon redundancies. We're talking about major international pipelines, and not just one location, Freddie.
Yeah.
Multiple explosions in multiple locations that aren't even near each other. This team in this film, Freddie, couldn't even find the pipeline. Could they on their first go? Because it's so dark down there.
You can't do it. You need to have a special warfare lab, if you will, that's gonna basically provide you with all the tools that are necessary to put together a diving profile, a concept of operation. That's gonna be having experts in explosives, calculating the force, the amount of explosive that is needed. You know, these pipelines are under the pressure. If you don't blow them at the same time, for example, to take a chunk of that pipeline at once, you're going to have a problem, because as soon as it's decompressed, it's not under pressure anymore. You're going to need more explosive, because you do not benefit from the pressure coming from the gas stuck in the pipeline. So all that needs to be calculated. There are very precise calculations to do that. And of course, if you're going to have, as Ursh say, you know, 2 bombs per pipes, then we should have 8 bombs. So far, if I'm not correct, and I've been following the work of other of my colleagues, and perhaps one of the best out there is Eric Anderson with regards to finding, because with Jeff Brodsky, which I believe you interviewed not so long ago, these guys went there. You know, they spend time, they send their robots in the waters, they actually filmed the crime scene. That's amazing. Citizens have to do the job now, because otherwise nobody cares, because everybody knew who did it. But at least we have some really high quality footage that explained to us. So thanks to Eric and Jeff for doing that, because it also gives us a lot of context, and it helps us to really understand, you know, these explosives, you know, what kind of explosive was required. The mainstream media was talking about 500, you know, kilos of explosives, you know, I mean, some crazy numbers. And then when you actually put it together and started to be rational about the numbers and taking into consideration the pressures in the pipe, suddenly you only need, you know, under 50 kilos. So that's a different operation. When you need to transport 500 kg and then you got to transport 50 kg, it's just simply not the same logistics. So again, you know, this is how you don't need to have a mug shot of US or German or Danish or Swedish Navy or British Navy, you know, planting something. You don't need this mug shot. All you need is to be rational and examine and understand the environment in which this particular sabotage took place. And then after that, you need to choose your perspective. Look at it from a Russian point of view, look at it from a Ukrainian point of view, and then look at it from a Western NATO states members point of view. And then you look at the one that fits the most what you can describe at a crime scene. And that's exactly what we did. We're not accusing anyone. All we're saying is that that's what it is. We can characterize this. Who had access to explosive, who had access to this kind of logistics, who had a control of the operational area, we know that. We just have to put the dot together and ask for a formal investigation into submarine activities in the Baltic Sea, in the NATO Lake.
Yeah, and yeah, exactly. To control the site, you know, not just during the prepping of the operation, but later when the detonation occurs, and then after, during the mop-up operation, you need to control the site, the perimeter. It takes a lot of naval and military, joint coordinated military resources to do that. That's exactly what we see in the evidence. Certainly, this is what you have shown, part of anyway, in this recent report. One last question, though, Freddie, on this. Submarines. How do divers go down with submarines? Is there technology available for divers to go down in a military sub, pressurize, go out, do the job, come back? You've got some information about this in the article. Just explain. I've got a video clip as well that you've supplied us, Freddie, which we'll play in a moment. But how does this work? We've got a few images here in the article. If you just kind of just quickly explain to us the logistics of this.
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, the divers that operate from submarines are often combat divers. Some of them have an EOD background, which is explosive ordnance disposal background. Most of them are tactical divers and technical diver. That means they are very comfortable, you know, below the 40 mark, if you're at 40 meters mark. So they're very comfortable at 100 meters. They are completely fluent in terms of designing the appropriate diving profile. They understand the technology, the kind of mixed gas they're going to need to breathe. They are completely fluent about compression, recompressions, and so on. And these guys are deployed because this is what submarine is all about. You know, it's a very lethal weapon because it's extremely discreet. It's very stealth, if you will, and it allows basically to drop combat divers to some shores very close to the shore, but also they can drop these divers to take care of submarine infrastructures, you know, underwater infrastructures. Absolutely no problem. This is part of special activities. That's what they train for. Now, the way to do that, you don't need to be dropped from a surface ships, and you know you can do it straight from the submarine. You got two areas where you can exit from. One is the torpedo areas, and it really takes a very particular procedures that you need to be trained with. And then the second area, it's simply basically what is known as a lock-in trunk. The lock-in trunk, it's basically a lock-in chambers that can be pressurized so that it allows you to mimic the environment that you will find outside of the submarine, and then vice versa. You can recompress the chambers to allow the divers back in, and then you put them in a compression chamber. So again, what's very interesting is that the level of access that a submarine provides you, the ability now for these divers to exit the submarine and go back in, or even put it back in a cage and brought back to the surface. They have many options. You know, I'm not, of course, a professional diver, so don't take my word for granted. Do your homework. But what I can guarantee you is that the locking trunk exists, and there's also a hatch on top of the submarine where all the equipments, all the gears that they need for the special operation is stashed. So they can go there, open it up, take their stuff, go to their operation, come back, put it back, get back into the lock-in chambers, pressurized. So it's a process. It's only top divers that are obviously recruited for this kind of jobs. But as I said, they are not necessarily Navy SEALs. All right, the U.S. Navy have these operators, and a lot of them have mine countermeasures and explosive ordnance backgrounds. So again, it's really not a far stretch to have a NATO submarine areas with divers being able to access what we know today as the Nord Stream blast sites to plant and rig this pipeline with explosive. Absolutely feasible, not even a doubt.
And just give us, and that includes underwater demolition as well, because that's part of the job of EOD and some of these other groups, mine countermeasures, including underwater demolition. So it's all part of the same skill set, just so people are aware of that. So these are the specialist areas. And, you know, myself, having spoken to people who are working in this field, Freddie, obviously we all know people, because we're journalists, and you know, some of our best friends are working in the military, so we do have these conversations over a few beers, as it were. And I asked one of my colleagues, if you will, you know, how long does it take to get to that level of EOD, to where you're actually operational? How many years do you have to be diving? And he said minimum 10. Yeah. Minimum 10. That's NATO standard, by the way. So some of these divers, Freddie, you'll find that some of them are a bit older, a bit more mature, that would be selected for these types of operations. You know, they could be in their late 30s, into their 40s in some cases. You know, very experienced divers have been doing it for years. You need experience, don't you? That's the number one quality in this field, is experience. Right. It's not strength. It's not toughness or craziness. It's literally experience and intelligence. You can only get that by being in the field and being active in it for, you know, 20 years or something like that.
Yes, and it's really a tight team. I mean, what probably marks me the most is that when a top diver, special activities will tell you that, you don't need to ask yourself too many questions about who did it. Just ask yourself who can do that, who has the ability, the knowledge, the know to do that. And you're going to understand very quickly that there's very few people that can do this kind of job. And you don't have to look too far, So that's really one part of it. And then the other side of it is to, as I said, to the organization chart for Baltops is a treasure, if you will, because it really provides you the lay of the land, if you will, for the chain of command. And for me, like when I see some guys like the CBs, underwater construction team, they used to be called the underwater demolition team, but I guess it was not too popular anymore. But, to see these guys in the blue waters of the Baltic, it's not the good news. And then you get mobile diving salvage number 2 teams as well. All that, when they come together, as I say, with EOD platoons, they form this expeditionary mine countermeasures. These are absolutely a dead sentence for pipeline or in infrastructures. These guys are good. They are some of the best in the world. And, as I said, this is not an attack on the diving community and the military community. I have a lot of respect for these guys because they're really risking their life when they do this kind of job. And at the end of the day, there's a chain of command and you follow orders as long as they're legal. Legal, not some crazy orders, but that's it. That's what it is. This is what special activity people sign up for, an NDA and, Bob's your uncle, as you said.
So tell us about this video before we play this. What are we looking at? What are we about to watch here?
Yes, that video is interesting because it's really showed different aspects of submarine activities, So as I say, when you, as a diver, you can be involved in a rescue operation. So taking out basically and diving to get submariners, outside of the submarine. There's different techniques that can be used. And we also know that mini submarines are used for this kind of operation because they simply can stick their locking chambers with the locking chambers of the submarine to extract them and keep them in a pressurized environment. If you look at the Swedish Navy, for example, they have the URF, it's called the URF. It's a yellow little submarine, and it's operated specifically for extracting submariners from their submarines or submarine collisions, submarine in difficulties. These guys will be able to go there and match the surface of the submarine that's allowed them to take these guys out, and literally, more importantly, to provide them with that pressure that they were in at the bottom of the ocean. So that's really interesting, if you will. That other are more kind of husbandry. They have like a lot of diving and salvage, maintenance operation. They take care of ships, vessel, submarine, and of course, special activities is an important part of special operators and divers operating with submarine. They'll be taken to a location for very different reasons. As I say, it can go from sabotage all the way down to irregular warfare, from basically extracting maybe someone. There's a lot of possibilities. And these guys are just so good. I mean, I don't know how they do it, to be honest with you. They're just so amazing. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how amazing they are. Someone took out the Nord Stream pipeline, and our grandparents are shivering in their home because the electricity bill is so high that they cannot afford it. And we've lost hundreds of thousands of business, if not millions of business, across the continent in Europe. And that is simply because Germany somehow felt that it was okay. I'm not accusing Germany, the German people.
Well, we'll get into that in a moment. Let's play this video real quick. We'll watch this.
Yeah, sorry, I kind of digressed a little bit.
Get your comment after. Here we go.
Of potential work is above and beyond almost any other rate in the Navy.
We do underwater ships husbandry, we do salvage, and special warfare support.
We can also do a lot of deployments. We go all over the world. That's kind of our motto, is we dive the world.
U.S. Navy divers responded to the bridge collapse in Minnesota. Navy divers helped with the aftermath of Katrina. Navy divers help with recovery efforts in the Philippines and Haiti and the Caribbean and South and Central America, all over Asia. I've salvaged a tank, I've done numerous helicopters, I've deployed to places that I didn't even know where they were on the map, and there's guys that do way above anything that I've ever done. Job satisfaction with being a diver is immense.
I think honestly with the divers, the SEALs, the EOD that I've had an opportunity to work along with, that has definitely been the biggest motivation for me.
So, Freddie, I mean, you've got monitoring here, you've got state-of-the-art support. You know, that's what's required to do this type of operation. It can't be done on a sailboat. You got decompression chambers, deep dives. They're going to need to go into decompression when they come up. You know, all these sort of things. And they want us to believe that no, the Ukrainian crack super soldiers who trained in a quarry outside of Lviv somehow, no, they did it in a 50-foot sailboat. They managed, that's what the Wall Street Journal, Boyan Pansevsky wants us to believe, as well as CNN and the BBC and everybody else, saying, no, don't look at any of this at Baltops. Don't look at our state-of-the-art military from the US, the UK, Norway, Germany, Sweden, Denmark, etc., etc. Don't look at any of that. And the Navy SEALs don't. No. It's these Ukrainian a drunken evening of Ukrainian crack divers that on a 50-foot rented sailboat with no kid on it, and you know, that's it. That's it. They did it. You know, they must have done it. Why? Because the Wall Street Journal said so. Because Der Spiegel said so. Because Deutsche Welle said so. I mean, it's just patently ridiculous at this point. I mean, when you really think about it.
It is, and it's compartmentalized in any aspect you can imagine. I think I will tell you that in the military in Poland as well, and in Germany, very few people are aware of this. Right? So some people are extremely genuine about what they believe in, because they just simply don't have a need to know. But if you look at the confliction agency that has, you know, two countries behind it, namely Germany and Poland, able to conflict and monitor all the water managements, all the water movements, in the 4 exclusive economic zones, 2 of whom were where the Nord Stream sabotage took place. How do you can even discuss, you know, the German Secret Service or, you know, special service can even tell us that, you know, they believe a Ukrainian did it. when clearly working with Polish Navy, if you will, and submarine side of the Navy, as far as monitoring all the activities on the waters. So there's something that is just simply not, giving it. I'm not getting the points of what the Germans are trying to do, because that is now outside. Evidence are absolutely backed up. We need to ask questions to the Germans, and they need to tell us what's going on here. What's going on, because this is the NATO Lake. This is nothing else but the NATO Lake. Nothing happened in NATO Lake with submarine so expensive, right? Without, someone, with the sensors, with all the even classified training areas. Don't forget that everything that I'm providing here is unclassified, which means that there is a classified version of that. We don't have it, right? So that means that they know, the German knows we did it. I'm quite convinced of that. And as I said, the second part is going to be a bridge, if you will, between underwater activities and surface activities. And that's going to be very interesting to see if it fits. We don't say it fits, but we'll present it in a way, hopefully, that's going to be strong, that's going to hold water. And again, that is without making any assumptions. We don't have to make any assumptions. Just present the fact and let the people decide for themselves.
And you've given your conclusions at the end here, and just kind of framing the story, I think, correctly, But yeah, the questions are answered. Why the location? Why was it done in the specific depth with the Danish and Swedish economic zones, and also near Germany? And now a lot of those questions, Freddie, are answered here. And so at least if we're pursuing this line of questioning, pursuing this hypothesis, which is backed up by a considerable amount of circumstantial evidence that makes a very compelling case, then, we've already answered a couple of these questions. And of course, why the location? And then why was there 17 hours between explosions? That's something that will come later, which you're working on as well. Yep. So yeah, I think this is I think you've thrown a grenade into the discussion here for sure. It's definitely, and again, we're not don't know for sure what submarine was used. We don't know which UAV, underwater autonomous crafts, were used, because they most certainly would have been used, I think, anyway, in parts of this operation. But imagine having all of this kit at your fingertips, and you can design an operation using all of these things we mentioned. Isn't that more preferable than sending the crack team of drunk Ukrainians in the boat? I mean, I would think so.
Well, they have a role to play, Patrick. At the end of the day, if you're going to want to have a parallel operation so that you can place Ukrainian in one of the port in Poland and tell them, well, you see, they were there, But on the other side, if you start to check, you're going to see that an amphibious ready group was there, or maybe another minesweeper was there, or maybe a submarine replenishment boat was there, So we have obviously a few candidates. Of course, we're not going to reveal it today, but we have a few candidates as far as submarine, which are very interesting. They're looking very warm, very hot, and hopefully we can prove it beyond a shadow of that who was in this particular waters. And then, of course, I'll take this opportunity to invite anyone that was involved in this kind of operation with under the NATO flag or not. It's irrelevant. But if you care about your country, if you care about Europe, if you care about, the well-being of your parents and grandparents and our economy, you owe it to everyone to tell us what happened, because there's no excuse, right, to tolerate an act of terrorism, in Europe. This is absolutely unacceptable, and it's an open door for more act of terrorism. And we have nuclear weapon, we have nuclear arsenal in France, we have, of course, in other countries, but we cannot let that happen unpunished. So if you feel that this is the right things to do and you have some knowledge about this, you should come forward. That's your simple responsibility as a citizen of Europe. Tell us what happened, whatever, anything that can help to put a name, to put a face on the Nord Stream saboteurs. Thank you.
Yeah. And again, this is the Deutsche Welt Ukrainian document. It's just so comical. They've got the the actors with the voices modulated, running around knocking on council flats in Kiev. I mean, it's just so ridiculous. But yeah, I mean, it's an expensive production, and if you've got a propaganda line, you got to spend money to deliver that to the public. What we're doing here, of course, is a little bit less expensive, but we're actually getting a lot of good information. And we can do that, of course, with your support. So we'll talk a little bit about that before we go. But Freddie, final words before we break. We've gone a little bit over time, but I think it's important. This is such an important story, and we'll bring that back up on screen so everybody can see the article from Freddie here. But such an important story, Freddie. This is available exclusive at 21stcenturywire.com. Nord Stream revelation: submarines in the NATO Lake. In the NATO Lake. Your final thoughts before we break. Go ahead, Fred.
Well, I personally think this is really the time for us to address the elephant in the room. We can no longer afford to keep on entertaining the nonsense that we've been provided with, and I think that this article could be the foundation, the serious foundation for more research. But we need to address NATO. We need to address the military operation that were conducted in this particular areas of Danish and Swedish Easy. And if we can break through the silence and get more people involved and starting to ask for answers, I think we can get somewhere, but we must get answers. It's not possible we're just going to let this happen in our backyard without fighting back.
Yeah, I think our governments have the resources and the ability to find out what happened. Of course they do, and many know what happened. And it's just a question of people coming forward. Because look, Freddie, you can kick the can down the road on this story till the next U.S. administration, but it ain't going to go away, and it's just going to eat at the legitimacy of NATO, I think. So it's better to nip it in the bud now, get it over with, deal with it, than like wait 4 years or 5 years, because there's so many people involved in this that the chances of them keeping a full lid on this is not, and the amount of political leverage and, kind of danger tripwires with all of these different countries now arguing over tariffs, arguing over, you've got a war in Ukraine still, you've got the US drifting from Europe on this. I mean, this information could actually be used to blackmail countries, governments. So it's best to get it out in the open immediately, deal with it. I'm a big fan of like saying the U.S. and whoever's involved should pay reparations to the citizens that have been damaged by this. And in terms of compensation, this is an act of war committed by NATO against their own people. At least that's the conclusion we're drawing here. So, there needs to be compensation, reparations for that. That would certainly go a long way to resolving the problem. But yeah, it needs to be dealt with. And there's enough information on the table right now to make a very strong case. So.
Yes, and we need to held accountable the media as well. I mean, this is it. Journalists are journalists at the end of the day. We have a responsibility, and we got to be very balanced in the way we present any information. It's become so political to the point that it's become social engineering, whereby you're starting to pose a threat, if you will, to population for them to accept the NATO expansion program, if you will. So you see Finland and Sweden have been terrorized, and they have leaflets coming to their posts, telling them that, well, you're about to get a war, so you need to know everything about this, that, and that, how to survive, and all that. This is social engineering. This is about maintaining a level of fear. Then you get, of course, all these cable systems and this attack on cable. What is that all about? Is it perhaps just not part of an other kind of readying operations to maintain the level of threat necessary to keep Finland and Sweden interesting, and more importantly, the population supporting their government? Say, thanks God we joined NATO. Why on earth Sweden needed to join NATO? I just can't get it. What threat Russia is to Sweden? I've never seen it. I've never seen it. It's just simply not there. But with social engineering, everything can appear real. So, but as I say, unless you awaken to that and you ask, your government to be accountable for what they're saying and explain exactly what, is in there for them for joining NATO. I mean, Finland was so independent; they were very prosperous. Why on earth these people need to join NATO? You tell me. So you see, that's the problem. I think everybody has kind of swallowed the story, the NATO story and the US story, and have ended up now locked up into some kind of military organization that is far from being defensive, as we all know. So it's dangerous. It's dangerous, and we need to bring back peace. And unfortunately, and as I keep on saying, if I felt as a French person that Russia was enemy, I would say it. I would say, you know what? Russians are dangerous. They're a problem. We need to prepare ourselves. I just simply don't see it. I just don't see it. I see him as a very important economic partner, someone that could also be very important for our country, especially Central Europe, in order to develop multi-polarism, being able to really work alongside with countries in the Balkans and further down, of course, in Eurasia, and being part of this new market, this new future economy and the global South. So yes, I'm all for multi-polarism, but I'm not a globalist. I think each country has the right to set up discrete economic agreements with other countries on a bilateral level, being able to manage their own foreign policies. And this big block of EU and NATO is just simply not something I believe in, because I think they're not telling us the whole story. And that is the reason why I'm also interested in holding them into account. And the United Nations and other government across Europe should take the same kind of attitude towards NATO. And it's not immune. All right, there's a lot of files on NATO involving really kind of questionable activities. It's not me saying it. It's online. You can check it for yourself.
Operation Gladio, for starters, the Libyan operation, the dirty war in Syria, the list,
you name it. There's so many more, and assassination campaigns and all that. I mean, you can go very far with that, but it's not the topic of today, of course. But I don't want to digress. But really, clearly, this NATO is not, immune from prosecution. It is just not. If it's involved into something that is criminal, especially something that is, and that should have for a long time been described by the mainstream media as an act of terrorism, what else it is, right? If you attack an infrastructure that is not part of a military complex, that is not providing any revenues to a nation, and that is located in one of your oldest member states, how do you can call that a military target? This is just a target, a deliberate target, as NATO called them. And someone had to green light NATO, or whoever from the Western member states of NATO wanted to get involved with the Nord Stream. They had to ask permission to Denmark. Yeah. They had to. You can't just go to Denmark easy and say, oh, I think this is Russian. I don't like it. I'm going to take it out. You can't just do that. No. Right? And there's a process in NATO. If you look at the targeting strategy, I've talked about it, I think, in a previous interview. But the STAR process is something that would really be interesting. That was one of the procedures that people need to check on. It's called the STAR process. And I think I put the link in the article.
You did. You mentioned it.
All right. I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not going to claim that I know everything about it. But what I can tell you is that this process is extremely interesting, because it has this really kind of a set of rules by which, if NATO wants to take out a target that is located in one of the member states, or a partner, a friendly NATO nation, a NATO-friendly nations, then of course they would have to go through this process where they ask authorization, they discuss, and eventually agreed on a suitable course of action. Right? But nothing happens without this process taking place. So if, let's say, the United States, and I'm not saying the US, maybe the UK or other member states, maybe France, wanted to take out the Nord Stream pipeline, they would have asked to ask Denmark, to go through the STAR process in order for them to establish the procedures, the targeting procedures, because this is a deliberate target. And that's really, for me, if you read between the lines, it clearly implies that these states, these coastal states, would have had to be aware and green light this operation. Doesn't mean they were involved. I think they were, but it doesn't mean it. It means that they knew about it.
Yeah, and this is just not in Europe's interest. It's not in the interest of any of the member states per se, at least the citizens of these countries in NATO and Europe. But it is in the interest of the United States. And I ask myself the old Latin question, Freddie, qui bono, who benefits? And it's pretty clear that the United States has directly benefited from this in terms of energy sales, but also in terms of basically turning Europe as well against Russia, and also hemorrhaging the economic performance of a country like Germany, and then reaping the benefits by getting German industry to relocate in America. I mean, at some point, it's just kind of obvious. There's just too many benefits for the United States. They run NATO. Everybody else is subservient. So if this operation was done from the top down, as Seymour Hersh and others are positing, then certainly the case that you've made here, Freddie, today, at least for this specific aspect of the possibility of submarine activity, but there's a lot more to your analysis. I think it does fit. It does fit. It's very plausible, and it does go a long way to explaining that this is more likely than not part of, has been used multiple major NATO exercises to conduct this sabotage operation, including Baltops 22, Northern Coasts 22, right, as well as other drills, which are listed and explained in your article here. We'll put it up on screen once again. Exclusive Nord Stream revelation: submarines in a NATO lake by Freddie Ponton. That's at 21stcenturywire.com. Ladies and gentlemen, get this article, read it for yourself, check it, fact check it. The links are there. Everything is well researched and linked. You can go off and do your own research off this article. Feel free to fact check it, and if there's any issues, do put in the comments. If you are concerned with any of the information here, do get in touch with us as well. You can get us on X, but also via email as well, and from our website, 21stcenturywire.com. And again, we put the call out for anybody who has any interesting information on this story. Do get in touch with Freddie or any of the team at 21 Wire, and we will do our best to follow up on it. But so in the meantime, yeah, I think we've covered quite a lot of ground here, Freddie. Again, yeah, to the article, there's more than enough information in there. It really, really sets the scene nicely, and I really appreciate your work on this, and I'm sure a lot of other people out there do as well. Freddie Ponton.
Thank you very much, Patrick.
And there he goes, ladies and gentlemen. That is Freddie Ponton. Again, 21stcenturywire.com. You can find this and so much more in terms of reportage. This is a great investigative and research piece, of course, but that's the sort of quality that we endeavor to bring you week in, week out. And again, just a reminder, we're having a winter fundraising drive at 21 Wire. Go to our website, just a week left. Go to donate and support. There's a button at the top of the screen. You can click on that. There's many ways you can help us: PayPal, crypto, credit card, any spot donations, or subscribe and become a member at 21wire.tv. That's one way you can support us for very little money, but it does add up, and we need more people subscribing and becoming members to 21 Wire. And there's a membership site there, 21wire.tv. That's the members suite, and we're working to improve and build that out as we speak. So again, if you like what we do, if you like the type of work that we do, the conversations we're having, these interviews, and the other content, we just launched this new midweek program, please consider supporting us. We're really going to need your help going forward at 21stcenturywire.com. So again, we appreciate all the support we can get. Thank you very much, all of you who have donated. Listen, folks, great segment with Freddie, and that's all we've got time for this week. Hopefully we'll see you guys on Sunday for the Sunday Wire. So hopefully we'll have a few surprises in store. Last week was epic. We'll have another great show for you coming up this Sunday. Trying to keep up with the news, keep up with Donald Trump, and all the changes that are happening at a rapid clip. I'm your host, Patrick Henningsen. It's been great talking to you guys. Take care. All the best.